Linda sat at the kitchen table, her gaze fixed on the now empty coffee cup, as she anxiously awaited today's conversation with her husband Jim. Fortunately, their children were staying the night at the neighbor's house, so at least they wouldn't be around for the shouting and arguing she anticipated. How had it all spiraled so far out of control from what started as some harmless flirting and a few lunches? Linda had sensed for over a month that something was wrong, and after taking the last test she knew she had to tell Jim. He had left early in the morning to run an errand, leaving her waiting for his return. Just then Linda heard the doorbell ring, accompanied by the rumbling of a large truck outside. Surprised since she wasn't expecting anyone but Jim, she figured someone had gotten lost and needed directions. "Can I help you?" she asked as she opened the door. "Linda G., the man inquired. "Yes, I'm Linda Gardner." "What can I do for you?" she repeated. "I've got an order to pack up your belongings and move them to Southwest 10th Avenue. He said, handing her a clipboard while shouting at the men in the truck to start unloading boxes. "There's been some mistake. I didn't place any order," she insisted, handing the papers back to him. "Yes, ma'am, I understand, but the order was made by Mr. Jim Gardner last week," he responded, showing her Jim's signature at the bottom of the document. "Look, my husband will be back soon. I'm sure he can clear this up," Linda replied. "Mrs. Gardner, I just saw your husband 20 minutes ago. He told me to give you this envelope in case you tried to stop us," the man said, handing her a large manila envelope. "Now, if you could please show us the master bedroom. We were only given an hour to finish." Linda opened the envelope and glanced at the note. Almost in a whisper, she told the man, "It's the first room at the top of the stairs on the right." The movers quickly made their way upstairs and spent the next 40 minutes packing up box after box. Occasionally they asked Linda a question, but she remained silent, lost in thought. They did the best they could, without her input. 50 minutes after they arrived, the workers informed her they were done and ready to leave. "I need your signature," Mrs. Gardner, the lead mover, requested. Linda scribbled something at the bottom of the paper, and the team departed. Exactly 10 minutes later, her father pulled into the driveway. "Sweetheart," Ken said, visibly shocked by what had just unfolded. "Jim asked me to come get you, knowing you probably wouldn't be in any condition to drive. Your mother's waiting for us, and the movers will put your things in the garage for now. We'll figure everything out later," Ken explained, gently leading Linda out of the house. "This can't be happening," Linda said aloud as Ken helped her into the car. "Where is Jim? If he were here, I could fix all of this," she thought to herself. "He would listen to me, wouldn't he?" Half an hour later, Jim returned to the house, this time with a locksmith. "Change all the locks, including the garage door code," he instructed. "Leave me 5 sets of keys, and make sure the side garage door is locked," he added before stepping into his now empty home. Heading upstairs, he noticed the movers had done a fairly good job given the limited time they had. Checking his watch, Jim realized he had just 15 minutes before the next truck was due to arrive. Grabbing a few empty boxes, he packed up the remaining items the movers had missed, including her cosmetics and toiletries from the bathroom vanity. As Jim carried the last 2 boxes downstairs, the second truck pulled into the driveway. His sister, Donna, walked in with the movers. "Hey, sis," Jim greeted her with a hug. "Why don't you take the second bedroom on the left, next to the bathroom? It's bigger than the guest room, and it has a walk-in closet," he suggested. "We'll move the kids' stuff later, no problem. What are you going to do with Linda's car?" Donna asked. "Her father's supposed to pick it up later tonight after the movers finish," Jim replied. "Let me handle a few things. I'll stop by the office briefly, then I'll grab us some pizza for tonight," he said, making his way to the garage. "No mushrooms," Donna called out, while directing the movers on where to place everything. "Right on time," Jim remarked, checking his watch. From his car, he could see 3 of his closest friends deep in a heated conversation with David, his wife's colleague, who looked visibly upset. About 5 minutes later, Bob, one of Jim's friends, approached where Jim's car was parked. "He thought we were messing around until I pulled out my knife," Bob said, smirking. "I gave him 2 choices: either vanish within 24 hours or experience losing his manhood, and not in a hospital. I told him we'd be back tomorrow for his answer." Bob continued, "How are you holding up, man?" "I'll feel better tomorrow," Jim replied somberly. "I never imagined I'd have to deal with something like this, but I'll get through it. Anyway, I need to head out now. See you later at my place." Jim collected the photos and receipts that the detective had left at his office on Friday, during which Jim had been pacing in disbelief. He didn't even bother looking at the contents, those were just for his lawyer. $1,000 wasted, he thought, glancing at the bill. After dropping off the envelope at his lawyer's office, Jim picked up 4 pizzas and a case of beer before heading home. He planned to drink heavily one last time, as after tonight he would be a single dad, and setting a good example for his kids would be his top priority, unlike the example his soon-to-be ex-wife had set. By the time Jim returned, the moving truck had left, and Donna, along with some of her friends, was setting up her new bedroom. "Hey, bro," Donna greeted him as he walked upstairs. "Where's all the help you promised me?" she asked. "The guys are finishing something up for me. They should be here in about an hour," Jim explained. "How about we take a break and eat something in the meantime?" he suggested to Donna and her friends. Bob and the rest of the guys finally arrived just before 4 p.m., and by 7 p.m. everyone was sitting in Donna's room, drinking beer and enjoying the breeze from the open window. Everyone except Jim. Donna found her brother alone in the basement, watching old home videos. "Everyone's upstairs in my room, and we've already eaten. Can I bring you something?" she asked. "Not right now, sis, but thanks," Jim replied. "I just need a little time to myself. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything," Donna said, giving him a kiss on the top of his head before leaving, gently closing the door behind her. "I never saw this coming," Jim thought again. How could I have been so blind? A little over a month ago, while paying bills online, Jim had noticed a charge for an appointment at the local clinic. "Honey, did you go to the doctor?" he asked his wife, who was preparing dinner. "I thought I had the flu, so I went for a B12 shot," she called back. "Man, these prices are insane," Jim muttered to himself. $125 for a visit and a B12 shot, even with insurance. "I'll have to call them tomorrow. There must be a mistake on the bill." But there was no error. The next day, Jim called the clinic from his office. "Please connect me to the billing department," he requested. "How can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "Good morning. My wife, Linda Gardner, came in 2 weeks ago for a routine checkup and a B12 shot, but we got a bill for $125. With insurance, it should have been much less," Jim explained. After a brief pause, the receptionist asked, "Linda Gardner, right?" "That's correct," Jim replied. "Sir, she did receive a B12 shot, but she also had blood work and other tests," the receptionist informed him. "Blood work and other tests?" "What kind of tests?" Jim asked, growing increasingly frustrated. "I'm sorry, sir, we can't disclose that information," she replied. "Listen, Linda is my wife. I'm not asking for the results, I just want to know what tests were done," Jim said, his irritation building. "All right, since you're her husband, she had a full blood panel and a pregnancy test," the receptionist confirmed. "Thank you for the information. I'll pay the bill in full," Jim replied, though he was utterly stunned. Why on earth was Linda getting a pregnancy test when he'd had a vasectomy right after their second child was born? It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. Linda had always struggled with birth control, and she was adamantly against abortion. "It's murder, no matter how you look at it," she used to say. After the accident that resulted in their second daughter, Jim decided to take matters into his own hands. His vasectomy ensured there would be no more surprises, and it removed the abortion debate from their lives, or so Jim had thought. 10 minutes later, he was at his desk, flipping through the yellow pages to find a private investigator. Jim had never had any reason to question Linda's loyalty before, but now everything was uncertain. "She always comes home at the same time, except for the occasional team-building seminar," Jim explained to the detective. "I need you to start right away because I'm losing my mind, knowing she's cheating on me, and I need to know who it's with." Jim's next call was to his friend Dan, who worked in the same department as Linda. "Dan, it's Jim Gardner. I need a big favor. Can we meet at Tony's Cafe after work?" "Sure. See you around 5:30, Dan replied. Jim wasn't entirely sure how to approach Dan about the situation, but since they'd been friends for years, he decided being straightforward was best. As they sipped beers, Jim finally said, "Dan, I just found out Linda's cheating on me. I think it's with someone at her office, and it's been happening for a couple of months. I need to find out who it is." Dan was in shock. "Linda would never do that to you," he responded. "Jim, there must be some misunderstanding." "No mistake," Jim said firmly. "I have evidence. I just need to figure out who." "Jim, we're a small company. I know most of the employees by name," Dan responded. "Sure, there's some harmless office flirting, but that's all. Look, two people here owe me big time, and they always have the inside scoop. Trust me, if anything's happening, I'll call you. It's hard to believe this about Linda, Jim said. Not as hard as it is for me, he added. The next 3 days were miserable. Jim felt the urge to grab Linda, shake her, and demand an explanation, though deep down her reasons didn't matter anymore. Their sex life hadn't been extraordinary, but it wasn't bad either. They were intimate roughly twice a week, which Jim thought was reasonable given that they had 2 kids. Linda had never expressed any interest in trying new things in the bedroom, and she continued to reject the things Jim had requested, so nothing had seemed different. The only thing that now struck him as odd was that on the nights Linda returned from her monthly seminars, they never had sex. It could have just been coincidence, but Jim was now grasping at anything that stood out. The seminars took place on Friday afternoons at a hotel and typically lasted about 2 hours. Afterward, many of the employees skipped dinner and went to happy hour at the bar. On those evenings, Jim would either take the kids out to eat or stop by his parents' house, only seeing Linda around 8 p.m. when she got home. Now he questioned everything in their marriage, desperately trying to understand why Linda had started cheating. On Friday morning, Dan called. If she's cheating with someone from work, it's likely David Collins. He joined last year. There's been talk that they've had lunch together a few times, and they've even been seen dancing at happy hour, Dan informed Jim. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but it's all I could dig up. I hope you can work things out. Thanks for the info, Jim said, but I doubt that's possible. Jim contacted the detective, provided him with David's name, then shut down his office and went home. How was he supposed to continue playing the part of a loving husband when all he wanted was to throw her out and move on with his shattered life? That weekend, Jim and Linda went through their usual family routine: yard work, the kids' soccer practice, and their traditional Sunday barbecue with the neighbors. Linda wanted to be intimate on Saturday night, but Jim claimed his stomach was upset and turned away, falling asleep. He had no intention of being with her again after what he had learned. Jim was grateful for Monday, as work had become his sanctuary, a place where he could relax and finalize his plans. The last step was to complete the divorce paperwork. He had already chosen a lawyer and paid the fees. They had agreed to file for a no-fault divorce. Since both of them worked, Jim was asking for a 50/50 division of their assets, with no alimony involved. However, the non-negotiable part was that Jim would get custody of their 2 daughters. If Linda didn't agree, he would change the divorce grounds to adultery and send proof of her affair to everyone they knew. Jim knew Linda would be furious when she received the papers, so he had already obtained a restraining order. She could call the kids, but she wasn't allowed within 75 meters of the house. By Tuesday, the private investigator had gathered all the necessary evidence, including hotel room receipts from the hotel where Linda's seminars were held. The receipts were in David's name. The detective had also acquired surveillance photos of Linda and David walking hand in hand into a room, and in one shot they were even seen kissing in the hallway. Jim had no desire to look at the photos. He told the detective to simply put everything in a manila envelope and drop it off at his office, thanking him for the swift work. Jim assured him the check would be mailed by Tuesday. By Friday, everything was set. The neighbors had agreed to watch the kids for the weekend. Both moving crews were scheduled, and the locksmith was to finish by 2 p.m. Lastly, all the paperwork would be finalized on Monday and delivered to Linda by Tuesday afternoon. Linda has no clue what's coming, Jim thought, and he hoped it stayed that way. Linda's story. I was sitting at the kitchen table feeling sorry for myself when the movers knocked at the door. I asked them to wait for Jim, but when the lead mover handed me an envelope, I immediately knew what was inside. Jim had discovered everything. Inside was a copy of the pregnancy test I had taken at the clinic. At the time, I had thought it was just the flu like everyone else, but the symptoms lingered. I didn't have body aches, but something felt off. One morning, Carol jokingly said, "You look like you're pregnant again." Linda, that's when the idea first crossed my mind. Maybe she was right. When David joined our office, I had just turned 30 and started feeling like an old married woman. I helped him settle in, and he was always so polite and smelled amazing. David looked good, even though he was 5 years younger. We quickly realized we shared a love for the same music, and we both adored Mexican food. Not long after, we began going to a nearby Mexican restaurant for lunch and grabbing drinks after our seminars. One Friday evening, after a team-building seminar, music was playing, and David asked me to dance. We danced to 2 upbeat songs, then a slow one. I hadn't slow danced with anyone since getting married, but with David it felt natural. We moved effortlessly across the dance floor, and when the song came to an end, we rejoined our group. I was flushed. Being in his arms felt so comforting that I didn't want the music to stop. After a few drinks, I figured it was best to go home. That night, I nearly jumped on Jim, but I didn't do anything crazy. I just needed affection, and lots of it. Deep down, I knew I should have distanced myself from David, but I liked being around him. Aside from dancing and a few lunches, I didn't believe I had done anything wrong, at least. That's what I kept telling myself. Things only began to escalate on the 4th Friday. Our department had won an award for the best performance that month, and each of us received a $100 bonus. Naturally, we went to the bar to celebrate. After 2 hours, only 4 of us remained. I had too much to drink and told David that I needed to stop at a restaurant for some coffee before driving home. He kindly offered to accompany me. On the way, I stumbled and nearly fell, but David caught me. His arms wrapped around my waist, and one hand unintentionally ended up on my chest. "Are you all right?" he asked, helping me back to my feet. I don't know what I was thinking, but instead of answering, I gazed into his eyes and kissed him. He seemed surprised but quickly kissed me back. It felt like time stood still before I pulled away, blushing. "I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that," I told him. "Please forgive me." "Don't worry about it, Linda," he replied with a grin. "Let's just call it a thank you for saving your life. Now, how about that coffee?" he said, leading me to the restaurant. The following week, I tried hard to avoid David as much as possible. I found ways to stay busy during lunch and skipped happy hour on Friday. It was especially difficult when I realized I got flushed just thinking about being close to him. After 2 weeks of keeping my distance, I stayed for happy hour again. Jim wasn't expected home until 8:30, so I planned dinner and drinks with some coworkers. However, by 6:30, everyone else had left, leaving just David and me at the table. "How about we grab something to eat?" he suggested. At that moment, the band started playing, and I asked David to dance. For some reason, they played 4 slow songs in a row, and we danced to each one. My heart raced as we glided across the floor, and I was sweating from the rush of emotions. I don't even remember how we ended up in the back seat of his car. We did everything but the actual deed. He brought me to the brink of pleasure multiple times, first with his hands and then with his mouth. In return, I made sure David felt the same kind of satisfaction, savoring every moment. Before we knew it, it was almost 8 p.m. After fixing my hair and dress, I kissed him once more and headed to my car. Oddly, I didn't feel ashamed. I was still riding the high from those intense moments. I honestly couldn't remember the last time I had experienced that kind of pleasure. The guilt didn't hit me until I saw Jim and the kids later that evening. Jim wanted to be close that night, but I couldn't even look at him, let alone be with him. After a long 45-minute shower, I crawled into bed and just cuddled with him, avoiding anything more. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop. I was addicted. David and I started meeting during lunch again, and I couldn't wait to see him each time. A week later, he mentioned that he had booked a room for Friday evening, just in case I wanted to be alone with him after the seminar. We left the bar separately and met in the hallway near the room. "Are you sure about this?" David asked. "I'm not sure," I replied, "but let's get out of the hallway before someone sees us." We hadn't been in the room for more than 10 seconds before we were tearing off each other's clothes. His touch sent waves of excitement through me, and as he got closer, I was already full of anticipation. The intensity made me cry out, though I tried to stifle the sounds with a pillow. I couldn't help but think how skilled David was, wishing Jim had the same abilities. As things progressed, the sensations became overwhelming, and I had to take a moment to catch my breath. But I stayed fully in the moment, determined to enjoy every second. Afterward, we both felt satisfied and shared a few light-hearted moments before going our separate ways. I made it home with 45 minutes to spare before Jim and the kids returned. David and I met twice more before I began feeling sick. At first, I thought it was just the flu, but when Carol joked about me being pregnant, I panicked and went to the doctor. When the test results confirmed it, I didn't want to believe it. David always used protection, and Jim had been infertile since his surgery. Staring at the test results in the envelope, I knew I was caught. Jim knew everything. So I sat in the kitchen, waiting for him to come home, preparing to break the news, but everything came crashing down before I could even speak. Jim was determined to make both David and me pay for what we had done to our family. He wanted David out of the picture completely, and he wanted me to suffer. His unmarried sister Donna was moving in to help him with the girls. What did he know about raising daughters and dealing with their issues? His parents would be there for support, and he knew it wouldn't be easy, but they would manage. On Sunday night, Jim sat the girls down with Donna beside him and explained that he and their mom were having problems and Aunt Donna would be staying with them for a while. He assured them they could see their mom whenever they wanted, but she wouldn't be living with them anymore. They all cried and hugged, but a big bowl of ice cream helped soften the blow. By Tuesday, Linda had been served with divorce papers, and though she called my cell phone repeatedly, I had nothing left to say. When she called the house, Donna answered. My sister tried to explain that it was over, but Linda wasn't listening. I had already cancelled our joint credit cards, removed her from my insurance and retirement accounts, and handled everything necessary for the divorce. Still, on Wednesday I let her see the kids. Donna took the girls to see their mum at my parents' house and stayed there until Linda left. I didn't lay eyes on Linda again until we were all gathered at the lawyer's office. Linda's lawyer immediately started making one demand after another. When he brought up the issue of full custody for Linda, I stood up and said I was done. "We're just getting started. Where are you going?" he asked, surprised. I spoke quietly but firmly. "I'll say this only once. The terms stay as they are. Linda can see the kids anytime, but I will have physical custody. She's carrying another man's baby. And my children will not be present to witness the birth of her illegitimate child. If you challenge me on this or anything else, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman my soon-to-be ex-wife is. So I suggest you think long and hard before you say another word." We took a brief break to calm down. When we resumed, Linda agreed to all my terms, and the papers were signed. "I'm truly sorry, Jim. I don't know how I let this happen. I've only ever loved you," my now ex-wife sobbed. "Not enough," I replied. As I was walking out, I turned to look at Linda one last time. "Since you two got so close during that team-building seminar, maybe you can claim compensation from the company for a workplace injury," I added with a smirk before leaving for good. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.